Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining the Behind Company Lines podcast. Today we have Dallas Griffin, co-founder of Anode Labs, which is building the React network data and connectivity layer to allow people to engage with their electricity consumption and flexibility. Dallas, I can't even get kind of wrap my head around what that means, but I'm so excited about the potential of not only the blockchain technology kind of in our day-to-day, we think about DeFi and all these other protocols, but honestly, the different layer that I think will make a big difference, which is the kind of the foundational layer of a lot of the things I think we take for granted, maybe don't think about them as much, but that we can actually kind of recycle it and renew in regards to our energy consumption and things along that nature. But before we get into all that, what were you doing before you started Anode Labs?
Oh, I was doing something much more boring. So I was
Yeah.
investment banker for about 15 years. And so, yeah, come out of the energy and power sector. And fortunately, I had a colleague who kind of fully dragged me down the rabbit hole of what's possible to build in this way. And
Yeah.
working on React, we're doing something a lot more exciting now.
Yeah. And in regards to the energy, kind of the thought behind energy and blockchain technology, obviously you were working within the energy industry, but what was kind of the introduction to blockchain technology that essentially, and then what was the inspiration behind using the technology that was there and connecting it with the React network?
Yeah, so I'm like a boomer to most people in the industry, but really I think with the cool intersection here as it relates to blockchain, which is just it's a piece of this, is the incentivization power of really what's possible. In terms of the business we're building, that's a part of it. Really, what we saw was the necessity to connect distributed energy infrastructure at the grid edge and allow it to play a role in our energy transition. Because it has to be a critical part of the solution. If we don't use it, we're going to have a grid that doesn't work, and we're just not going to be able to achieve our climate goals. So it's kind of mission critical and just something we have to do.
Yeah. And describe for the audience about energy and kind of the energy grid system that we might not be aware of. Like, what are if there are, what are the inefficiencies? Honestly, when was it built, and has there been any kind of drastic milestone in terms of its like revamping or any kind of introduction of new technology? What's that system like now, and what can be improved?
For not describing yourself as an energy expert, Julian, those are great questions. It's really relevant to why this has to exist, what we're building has to exist. And so if you think about the electricity infrastructure, the power infrastructure in this country, on average, most of it's 40 years old. And so it's aging infrastructure. It's incredibly expensive to build power transmission lines and substations. And we're at a really, really important critical juncture. Over the last 20 years, we've had no load growth. So no increase in electricity demand. And while the economy's been growing, we've been able to offset the increased needs with greater efficiency from things at the grid edge, to things that are using electricity. We're now at a place where we're expecting 40% load growth by 2035. And so we're already having massive problem with blackouts and aging infrastructure. And now, for the first time in more than 30 years, we have to deliver more power and a massive amount of new power. And this is, of course, it's the electrification of everything. The next car I buy is going to be, I'm in Texas, so I have to get the Ford F-150 Lightning. So we're in a decade where most of us will be driving EVs. And so those are big challenges we're going to have to confront. And on the same side, as we try to reach our climate, we're building more and more solar and wind on the grid. The grid is getting greener and greener, and that's fantastic. But there are some challenges with that as well. The sun doesn't always shine. The wind doesn't always blow. And so these are intermittent generating assets. And you couple those two facts, right? An increasing amount of intermittent assets with a massive in demand. And the answer is we have to get a lot more flexible on the grid. And in terms of just tech at the grid edge, I'm talking about homes and small businesses where the lines go and people are actually using electricity. Our intelligence and ability to really understand what's happening at the grid edge in terms of tech, think 1970s.
Wow.
Your utility knows how much you're using at the end of the month in 15-minute increments in arrears. There's no real-time data at the grid edge. And this is a massive hole in our ability to really understand the grid edge and understand how flexible we can be at the grid edge and prepare for where we're headed in the now and the near future.
Yeah, two questions that pop into my head is what does the supply chain look like from the energy kind of generation, then to the some centralized hub, I'm sure, and then distribution. What does that look like? Who kind of plays a role in those kind of parts of the supply chain? And if there's any parts missing, please let us know. And then secondly, what is the incumbent plan for addressing the increase in energy? You said a word, it was energy, not capacity, but you said generation or something like that. I can't remember exactly what you said, but what's the incumbent plan for tackling that outside of the React network?
Sure. Yeah. So as we think about just the system in general, to kind of keep it simple and break it into the components, you have the generation of electricity, right? So you're either burning fossil fuels. Yeah. So historically, in the past, that's been a lot of coal, very dirty. It's been natural gas, cleaner than coal, but still burning fossil fuels. And these fuels are burned. A rotor is turned. It's kind of a magical process of how electricity is generated from all that you have to go back to high school to really learn again. But then it moves in transmission. So the big metal poles, metal lines on the side of the road to substations, and then wooden poles, metal lines to homes. And so utilities are really, they're in the distribution business of trying to plan for how much the city of Houston's going to need. And so you have a local utility that's in the business of delivering power. Yeah. And then other businesses in a lot of areas that are in the business of generating power. And so it's pretty archaic, but it really comes down to somebody out there today is forecasting what the weather's going to be tomorrow. And based on that weather, we think that this is going to be the electricity demand. And there's somebody at the beginning of that supply chain that's going to put more or less coal on a conveyor belt to go into the coal plant based on that. And for most of history, the power system has been about pushing as much power to the consumer as we think they're going to require. Now, power plants go down, the weather's different than we think, or we have increasing intermittent assets. It's not as windy as we think. So now wind turbines aren't generating as much electricity, or it's not as sunny as we thought. And so we have to have an intelligent system. We have to not only push electricity, but also be flexible on the other side as well. So when we have energy storage at the grid edge, that energy storage at the grid edge is the famous pushing production from this end. Yeah. When we have the ability to maybe wait 30 minutes before we kick the AC on, if demand is peaking. Those are all things we can do, but we have to engage that person at the grid edge and their electricity consumption and their flexibility. And more importantly, very important to all of this, they have to be compensated for that. There has to be some reward, some reason that they're engaged. So there's a lot of reasons, right? If you're interested in building a greener future, this is as important as transportation. Those are the two big things you have to solve for if you want to have a greener future. And so, I think the electron is going to be the most important commodity of the next century. Yeah. We have to start thinking about how we're using it in our homes, how we're putting it into our car, when we're doing those things, and how it fits into the larger equation. And this is a market where flexibility at the grid edge, the ability to reduce demand, or to take stored electricity in a battery and put it into this complex market when it's most needed. That's the same thing as having a little coal plant, or let's say a green plant, having a wind turbine that you can turn on like that, right? So the ability to be flexible and kind of bring responsiveness from the demand side is valuable. And you can be compensated just as if you owned a little virtual power plant at your home.
Yeah. And when you say the grid edge, describe that. Is that like where the power plant sits and kind of stores the energy that is, say, not being used and could be used and distributed for future consumption?
The grid edge is simply where we're consuming electricity. So the end of the power lines where it has been pushed out, that is the grid edge. So in our homes, and so really having flexibility that we can leverage and use, having real-time information about how much we're using there, that's exceedingly valuable to other participants in the power market in helping balance the entire equation. As part of this, people don't think about this every day. There are people that think about this every day, but probably not everybody on this that listens to this podcast. But supply and demand of electricity, they've got to be exactly in balance. And if they're not, we have things break. Power lines have issues. Devices in your home will trip up. And so balancing that equation, we have to design a framework and work where it's not always balanced by responsive generation, where we're smart with the other end as well. And that really requires engaging people in their electricity consumption and flexibility.
Yeah. And so describe the React network and kind of what are the different components that's going to allow us from the grid edge to then kind of monitor and also even store and take advantage of maybe the consumption that we're not using, but maybe for future. Because right now it seems so linear. It seems like it's coal, energy, power plant, and then delivered to our homes, which I can see the challenge if one part of that linear formula just breaks.
Yeah. So you're right in kind of how you kind of illustrate that, but it is flexibility at the grid edge that is going to allow us to much better and more effectively balance this equation, make for a more resilient grid and one where we keep and we make it a better working system. So in terms of what individuals will do to participate in the React network, there's a simple device that participants can clip onto their breaker panel, and that device will start streaming real-time data to the network. Yeah. And so with some critical, we should quickly have the largest network of real-time electricity consumption data in the United States, which is massively valuable. Yeah. There's a lot of really interesting things we're going to build in as well that I think everybody will be interested in. I nerd out on this stuff, but understanding how much your HVAC is using. Flip a switch and you see the response of how much that light bulb turned on, and really, understanding how flexible you are and the volatility of at nighttime I use this, but at 2 p.m., I'm 10x that amount. There's pretty interesting things. And then also, so that's kind of the initial ask is that people install these devices and stream real-time data. We also are encouraging participants to connect other smart energy devices. So smart thermostats and home batteries, EV chargers, and home batteries, if I didn't already say that. But really, these are all the devices that really are immense sources of flexibility. And we couple these two devices, the ability to see real-time data and real-time response with flexible energy assets. Coupled together, you have the ability to have massive responses of verifiable action. Yeah. So, and you can think of everybody in your neighborhood agreed to, you know what, we can let the AC kick on like in 20 minutes. For that 20-minute window, if the grid is under immense strain, it's the same thing as inserting that much electricity. So that reduction in demand is the same thing as inserting, like, creating a virtual power plant out of nothing and coming to the call of the grid and receiving compensation for that action. So the great thing about this is everybody is eligible. That's the market. It's anybody that has the ability to touch the thermostat without getting yelled at. Anybody that pays an electricity bill.
Not me.
We're all, yeah, I know. I me sometimes, I'm alone. But we're all massive users of electricity, and we're going to be using more in the future as well. So we have to think about it more. And I think we can do this in an engaging way where it's that time is not only furthering us and kind of climate objectives and ESG objectives, but it's also profitable. And I think it's fun too. So that's my,
no, now I'm curious, where does kind of the network, the crypto network, where does that technology come into play? Is it the data collection? Is it on the individual who has that system in their home and they kind of have that data kind of linked into this blockchain or chain of blocks? And then second question is, how does it get redistributed throughout the network?
Sure. Yeah. So really we're not, in terms of how this network sits into the existing power system. While the power system is aging and it's old, there's also so much capital that's been spent. We're not building a new power system. We're working within the current system to make it much more effective. And so what the React network is really done, we're incentivizing participants to deploy these devices, stream real-time data, and the more, these meters that they connect and devices that they connect at a site. So if you think kind of a meter that goes on the breaker panel, a smart thermostat, a battery, an EV charger, the more devices they connect, the more they'll receive in rewards. There's a ton of utility in just having kind of access to your own data in the first place. But the more devices that you connect that are verifiably flexible devices and that we can see their ability to basically not draw power, or in the case of a battery, insert power, dispatch power when the grid is strained, that is valuable. And so the participants they'll be rewarded for the more devices that they connect, and values returned to participants as data is monetized. And if they want to use these assets to participate in the sale of flexibility through these virtual power plants, agreeing to maybe let somebody modify their their thermostat by a degree or two for 30 minutes, they could be compensated for that as well. So lots of opportunities for people to understand their electricity consumption and receive value from both streaming data and participating in any kind of flexibility response.
Yeah, I love this big push. You're one of many companies that I'm excited about their focus on kind of offering their users rewards for the activity that they do versus a lot of different companies for the past, say, 10 years. We're very much focused on user activity and then monetizing on, say, ads or whatever kind of, or their data or anything like that. But I love the reward-based activity because I think it really creates a stickiness within the system. And we all want to make better energy decisions, but I feel as though sometimes it's challenging to kind of incorporate them and then also return to that behavior. I guess also from a business point of view, what are the challenges of having people adopt in their home? Obviously, software is so easy to distribute. You can download or you can go to a platform that's hosted online in the cloud. But what are some challenges that we may not know about not only building hardware, but also distributing it and getting people to implement it in their home?
Yeah. So the devices that, we're talking about are pretty simple. Not everybody will be comfortable kind of doing anything with their breaker panel. Anytime I need to flip a switch, I'm sent there. Not everybody in my house has to do that, but so it's a device at a price point, $700 that most people can afford. And so I think my view, and there's so much utility around just understanding this in the first place, that I think to me, it's kind of a no-brainer to get engaged and start to understand how green your consumption is, how flexible you are, what modifications you could do. You have 3 mini fridges that you're not using that are costing you $100 a year? I mean, there's all sorts of things. So yeah, no, I think in terms of just participation, our hope is that people see this as an important initiative and something that they can benefit in terms of transitioning to a greener grid. And then also earning for doing it. And then also just enjoying the really interacting with their data and understanding their footprint.
Yeah. And then has this always been the product? Were you always envisioning something that connected homes together, collected data, and then had this whole kind of network? Or how has it changed during the development of the product?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Certainly we weren't always headed in exactly which direction, but as we've spent more time with the problem, our view is that in the power space, what's really needed is a horizontal layer that kind of ubiquitous across all consumers and connects people and devices and their energy flexibility and allows other power market participants to interact with them. I think in terms of the actual devices, we've kind of developed more of a big tent approach as the more we've thought about it. Really, the best approach is to connect as many people across the United States and as many assets and devices that have the ability to enhance flexibility and allow the grid to call on it and compensate it when needed.
Yeah. And from a company standpoint, or I guess a technology standpoint as well, how much adoption do you feel is needed to then actually make an impact that starts to, whether it's reduce the load on the grid, the energy, the plants as well, or you kind of influence the decision-making, I'm sure, from the other side of the supply chain, which is the generation of the energy. How much adoption do you need? Is it like 100 homes? Is it 100,000 homes? What does that look like?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think our hope is that we have well into the thousands, maybe tens of thousands of meters connected in kind of the first year. I think that would be a great kind of success case. But ultimately, residential demand is 35-40% of electricity demand. Small C&Is is an adder on top of that. So if you think about the total power market, really that's the size of the pie. And it's massive, but really I think initially here, realize it's new. I think there's a tons of reasons why people should be engaged with this. And so early adopters and people who really want to make a real difference and get engaged with the electron.
Yeah. Yeah. From, I guess, as you're kind of building this product and getting it into homes and starting to collect this information and distribute it, who is kind of the main beneficiary of obviously it's the user who has it plugged into their home can kind of get rewards based. But outside of them, who benefits from the system as well? And who are you, I guess, selling this information to then better make business decisions? Obviously, this information is so valuable, and there's got to be someone else that benefits on the other end. And who is that person? And have they been the same kind of stakeholder that you've had the whole time?
Yeah, no, I think a broad range of potential purchasers on the data side. In Texas, where I am, you have a utility, but then you have a power contract with a retail electricity provider. Their entire business is a financial business where they are kind of forward buying how much electricity they think you're gonna require. And when it comes time for your demand, it works out better for them if they get that forecast right. We'll have the best data to enable better forecasting with real-time data in the home. That will be highly valuable to anybody that's trying to better serve customers. Utilities, I think we'll find this data valuable as well. There's even insurance companies that have an interest in data like this, given if there's voltage if there's voltage issues within a home, it's a fire hazard. So, I mean, if you buy an $85 device and it alerts you to an issue that might burn your house down, I would say that would be worth it. So, I mean, there's all sorts of utility here, and the data is I think enormously useful. And that's aside from the ability to kind of participate in these virtual power plant flexibility programs as well.
Yeah. What do you feel like the advantage is for you as a smaller company, kind of making the push from the end user that larger companies may? Because if I'm thinking about it, I'm thinking my largest competitor is maybe the energy generators or the energy distributors. I'm in California, so we have Pacific Gas and Electric, and obviously implementing a bunch of devices in the home that they serve, I think is a tall. But I guess from a smaller company standpoint, what do you think gives you the leg up on something that it sounds like is extremely necessary, which is just understanding your consumption and real time and in the actual making the actual behavior changes that can influence and impact the load that's being done on these grids?
Yeah, I'd say people generally hate energy companies, and there's probably a lot of reasons. It's probably a different podcast, but a lot of low NPS scores in this space. I think it's we haven't seen a whole lot of folks in this space that have really engaged the consumer and been viewed as on the consumer side. Mm-hmm. And so our view is that for this to work, we have to engage the customer better than the current incumbents. We have to return as much value as possible to the individual, because that networks like these accrue value when they become massive. And so our goal is to have an app and an interaction that, is a tremendous user experience. And so enriching in lots of ways. And that returns as much value as possible to people who are engaged and joined.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about the traction that you have. How many devices are in how many homes? How much data are you now collecting? And what's going to be exciting about this next year's kind of leap in your company?
Yeah, Julian, great question. People that are listening to this, they get in on the ground floor. We're launching the app here in about 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. And so, and maybe 2.5 weeks. But we'll have information on the initial device that you can purchase and put in your home, that meter. And get a meter and download the app and start to get engaged with your electricity.
Yeah. And is this only for homeowners or is it also, can you say, if I rent out an apartment, can I use it also in my energy system?
Yeah. So it works for, if you have a breaker panel, you can participate here. So yeah, it works for most people in apartments and small commercial and industrial as well.
Yeah. And what are some of the biggest challenges that you face today?
Yeah, I think it's really just going to be building community, explaining why people should be engaged.
Yeah.
But really, yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be an important part of an increasingly important part of your home budget as we go through time. Electricity bills are up 20%. They're going to go up more. This grid requires more investment. And with the 40% increase in electricity, you shouldn't start paying attention in 5 years. You need to start paying attention now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's all about adoption and getting people to engage. That I think is the challenge here. A lot of reasons why they should, but gotta go to the app store and kind of take the next step.
Yeah. Yeah. If everything goes well, what's the long-term vision?
Well, yeah, and I think that the target that we have is that 40% of U.S. power consumption that is the residential wedge. We want every home to stream real time data and allow every individual to, when they leave the house and see, oh, my AC is running, nobody's there, let me turn it down.
Yeah.
See, that right now the grid is 70% coal in my region. I don't need to use this much electricity. Let me modify. Let me take my stored electricity in my battery and participate in this program and generate a return for an asset that provides me additional resiliency. Or let me kind of change my EV charging schedule. I'm not going to drive anywhere or tomorrow. I can make a simple modification there and make some money. I think there's so many ways to interact with the grid, and most individuals just have no access, no ally on their side to help them have that interaction. So our goal is to take 40% of U.S. power consumption and provide them that access.
Yeah, incredible. As a founder, what's the hardest part about your job?
It's a great question. I think what we're building is so necessary and exciting that I don't really kind of view anything that goes on the task list as an imposition or too hard. It's like you said, this is something that needs to exist. I think it's really just hoping that all of my efforts, my team's efforts, are kind of enough for the cause. It's a big problem to fix. We think we've got the right mousetrap here that returns value to people and gets them engaged. And I hope they agree.
Yeah. I always like to ask this question. Outside of time as a founder, what would you want to be able, or outside of time, as a founder, what would you want to have more of? Is outside of time, of course, is it spent on a certain type of task? Is it resources? What in particular as a founder do you kind of maybe maintains on your task list that you would like to address more often?
Yeah. If I could have more of anything right now, it would just be more kind of network disciples, just people who are super engaged and understand the vision, understand the opportunity. And so I think it's visibility and really engagement. What I want is people to plug in and start to get engaged and start participating in this market and to tell their friends and for their friends to tell their friends. So yeah, I'm using all the time I got right now. We'd love more time as well. Yeah. But yeah, I think just more allies here, more allies. So feel free to join in, anybody that's listening.
Yeah. I always like to ask this one as a little bit of a curveball, but if you weren't working on this, what would you be working on?
I've spent my whole career in energy. So it'd be something in energy. Yeah. And I think we're going to face massive challenges. And while this might be something that people kind of think about in the back burner, I'm from Texas, so this is on the kind of the front of the brain for a lot of people here, but there's no interaction. There's nothing you do in a day that doesn't require energy. Yeah. And so I'd be spending my effort there somewhere. But I think as we think about power generation in general, this is a big problem we're going to face over the next decade. And so I think this is where my attention is required, and I'd be doing something here.
I love that. The next question is one for my audience, but two for selfish research purposes. Whether it's early in your career or now, what books or people have influenced you the most?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a book I really love called The $1 Trillion Coach.
Oh yeah. I've heard of that. Yeah.
And so it's about Bill Campbell, and he's a college football coach that moved to Silicon Valley and became an advisor to, Steve Jobs would take a weekly or twice weekly walk around the neighborhood with him. He was just this mentor and advisor to Steve Jobs, but also to the whole Google executive, and there was I think CEO of Intuit as well. But yeah, it's a great read, and I think it's very informative around how to help teams work better and how to bring a different perspective to a team and get folks to really lean in and do their best work.
Yeah, I love that. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that I should have?
No, I think we covered a lot. But yeah, people feel free to reach out.
Where can we find you?
So we're at reactnetwork.io. Or we also Twitter. We're very active on Twitter and have a Discord. So yeah, jump in Twitter, join the Discord. We'd love to interact with anybody that has any questions, wants to get engaged. A lot of work to do. So we need a lot of allies.
Yeah. Well, Dallas, thank you so much for being on the show. I know we're a little bit over time, but I think the topic of energy and sustainability and what companies can do and what they're doing with the new technology that we have at our disposal is always, I think, a great conversation to continue. And we've done a lot of sustainability podcasts, so we'll have to have you come back on the show to go deeper into the progress that you've made from then until now. But Dallas, I hope you enjoyed yourself, and thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, Julian, thanks so much for having me. I love the podcast, and love to connect in the future. Thanks.
Awesome.